Hello, my fellow comic book collectors. Today's video might not be the most interesting one, but I think it's super interesting because this is the video where I'm going to read the entire Comic Code Authority, the code of conduct that comic publishers had to go through in order to get the Comic Code Authority stamp stuck to their books. So I'll show you what I mean by that Comic Code Authority, because it's actually something that has gone out of usage. It is only up till 2004 that it really, or actually 2010, that it actually remained in effect. And we got, this is I'll show you a Batman example. This is before the code. And so there's just this regular cover. There's nothing in the corner. It's just the publisher's mark. But then later, there was the Comic Code Authority. So this is the stamp that they would put on it. Comic Code Authority. And basically, that seal meant that it abided by the rules set forth by the Comic Code Authority. So what are those rules? And that's what I'm going to read today. I hope this will be interesting to some people that are really interested in the history of comics. I find it interesting, and you'll find some of the rules kind of interesting if if you're into that history, okay? And wanting to know why. What was the rules, what guided each of these comics? Like, what could they put in and what they were not allowed to put into the comics. So the Comic Code Authority, Comic Code of 1954. The Code of Comic Magazine Association of America, Inc., adopted October 26, 1954. Now, just so you know, this is the date that they adopted these rules, but it wasn't until 1955, like March, where they really started putting the code onto comics. So there was a few months kind of grace, I guess, between when the code was created and when they actually started implementing that code. Okay, so there's a preamble, fairly long preamble. The comic book medium, having come of age on the American cultural scene, must measure up to its responsibilities. Constantly improving techniques and higher standards go hand in hand with these responsibilities. To make a positive contribution to contemporary life, the industry must seek new areas for developing sound, wholesome entertainment. The people responsible for writing, drawing, printing, publishing, and selling comic books have done a commendable job in the past and have been striving toward this goal. Their record of progress, continuing improvement, compares favorably with other media and in the communications industry. An outstanding example of this development of the comic books, it has as a unique and effective tool for the instruction and education. Comic books also made their contribution in the field of letters and criticism of contemporary life. In keeping with American tradition, the members of this industry will and must continue to work together in the future. In the same tradition, members of the industry must see to it that gains made by this medium are not lost, and that the violations of standards of good taste, which might tend toward corruption of the comic book as an instructive and wholesome form of entertainment, will be eliminated. Therefore, the Comics Magazine Association of America, Inc. has adopted this code and placed strong powers of enforcement in the hands of the Independent Code Authority. Furthermore, members of this association have endorsed the purpose and spirit of this code as a vital instrument to the growth of the industry. To this end, they have pledged themselves conscientiously to adhere to its principles and to abide by all decisions based on the code made by the administrator. They are confident that this positive and forthright statement will provide an effective bulwark for the protection and enhancement of the American reading public, and that it will become a landmark in the history of self-regulation for the entire communications industry. So that's the preamble. So basically they're saying, this is a self-regulated thing. We're trying to keep that high standard, and they're really setting up what their goals are. And it's really important to understand that the Comic Code Authority was self-regulatory. It was the actual publishers themselves that had created this code. It wasn't like some government body that was forcing the comics to abide by some rules that they made up. And the reason for this self-regulation was they wanted to avoid that government interference, because they knew if the government got involved, that would be the death of comics altogether. And this was their way of, preemptively preventing that from happening. Okay, so now they kind of break it down into different sections. And the first section is the code for editorial material. And there's actually 41 guidelines that you have to follow in order to follow the Comic Code Authority. So this is the first one. General Standards Part A. Crimes shall never be presented in such a way to create sympathy for the criminal, to promote distrust of the forces of law and justice, or to inspire others with the desire to imitate criminals. No comics shall explicitly present the unique details and methods of crime. Institutions should never be presented in such a way to create disrespect for established authority. If crime is depicted, it shall be as a sultry and unpleasant activity. Criminals shall not be presented so as to be rendered glamorous or to occupy a position which creates a desire for emulation. Number 6. In every instance, good shall triumph over evil, and criminal punished for his misdeeds. Number 7. Scenes of excessive violence shall be prohibited. Scenes of brutal torture, excessive, unnecessary knife and gunplay, physical agony, gory, or gruesome crime shall be eliminated. Number 8. No unique or unusual methods of concealing weapons shall be shown. Number 9. Instances of law enforcement officers dying as a result of criminals' activities should be discouraged. Number 10. The crime of kidnapping shall never be portrayed in any detail, nor shall any profit accrue to the abductor or kidnapper. The criminal or kidnapper must be punished in every case. Number 11. The letters of the word crime on comics magazine cover shall never be acceptably greater in dimension than any other words contained in the title. The word crime shall never appear alone on the cover. Number 12. Restraint in the use of the word crime in the titles or subtitles shall be exercised. Okay, so those are the editorial standards that they must abide by for comics. And you'll notice that it's really focusing on the crime comics. And a lot of the stuff that appeared in Seduction of the Innocent were related to crime. I mentioned in a previous video how crime suspense stories led to this crackdown. So you can see why there's that much emphasis on it. A lot of the things that bothered Wortham the most were when police were depicted in a negative light, or where they showed how to commit a crime. That was a real thing that bothered Wortham. So you'll notice a lot of these rules kind of address those concerns. Okay, the next one is General Standards Part B. Number 1, no comic magazine shall use the word horror or terror in its title. Number 2, all scenes of horror, excessive bloodshed, gory or gruesome crimes, depravity, lust, sadism, mechanism, misogynism, or sadism, mechanism. Wow, I can't say that word today. Okay. When you start reading, you get sadomasochism. Wow. Shall not be permitted. Okay, so no say SNM. Okay. Man. Okay. Number 3. All lurid, uncensored, unsavory, gruesome illustrations shall be eliminated. Number 4. Inclusion of stories dealing with evil shall not be used or shall be published only where the intent is to illustrate the moral issue, and in no case shall evil be presented alluringly, nor as an injure that sensibilities of the reader, as to injure the sensibilities of the reader. Number 5, scenes dealing with instruments associated with the Walking Dead, no zombies, torture, vampires, vampirism, ghouls, cannibalism, and werewolfism are prohibited. Okay, so that last little bit, I actually showed in a previous video how one of the things that was brought up in the Senate hearings was comics related to cannibalism, and that was considered really, really objectionable to have kids reading about cannibalism. So they really want to eliminate that, and they want to eliminate a lot of the horror things. So vampires, zombies, all of those are gone. So kind of sad. General Standards Part C. All elements or techniques not specifically mentioned herein, but which are contrary to the spirit and intent of the code, are considered violations of good taste or decency, shall be prohibited. Dialogue. Okay, so then they break it down into specific things. Dialogue. 1. Profanity, obscenity, smut, vulgarity, or words or symbols that have acquired undesirable meanings are forbidden. Number 2. Special precautions to avoid references to physical afflictions or deformities shall be taken. Number 3. Although slang and colloquialisms are acceptable, excessive use shall be discouraged. Wherever possible, good grammar should be employed. Religion. This is the next section. And my printer cut off. So this is looking at costume and looking at how religion is reflected within comics. So nudity in any form is prohibited. Indecent or undue exposure. Number 2, suggestive or salacious illustration of suggestive posture is unacceptable. No good girl art. Okay, so that's a personal thing. Okay, number 3, all characters should be depicted in dress reasonably acceptable to society. Number 4, females shall be drawn realistically without exaggeration of any physical qualities. Note, it should be recognized that all prohibitions dealing with costume, dialogue, or artwork applies specifically to the cover of a comic magazine, as do they to the contents. So inside and outside, none of that, okay? Marriage and sex. Divorce shall not be treated humorously nor represented as desirable. So that's number 1. Number 2, illicit sex relations are neither to be hinted at nor portrayed. Violent love scenes as well as sexual abnormalities are unacceptable. Number 3, respect for parents, the moral code, and for honorable behavior shall be fostered. A sympathetic understanding of the understanding of the problems of love is not a license for morbid distortion. Number 4, the treatment of live romance stories shall emphasize the value of home and the sanctity of marriage. Number 5, passion or romantic interest shall never be treated in such a way as to stimulate the lower, baser emotions. Number 6, seduction and rape shall never be shown or suggested. Number 7, sexual perversion or any inference to the same is strictly forbidden. Okay, so you can see that it's very, very puritanical in the way that it's approaching these rules. No more good girl art. Very tame. Keep it PG kind of level. Okay, next is Code for Advertising Material. These regulations are applicable to all magazines published by members of the Comic Magazines Association of America, Inc. Good taste shall be the guiding principle in the acceptance of advertising. 1. Liquor and tobacco advertising is not acceptable. The advertisement of sex or sexual instruction books not acceptable. Number 3. The sale of picture postcards, pinups, art studies, or any other reproduction of nude or semi-nude figures is prohibited. Number 4. Advertising for sale of knives or realistic gun facsimiles are prohibited. Now, if you know anything about a lot of the Golden Age comics, a lot of the time they would have guns or knives on the back cover. So that is now prohibited. So a lot of the advertising revenue for these comics is now gone. Advertising for the sale of fireworks is prohibited. Number 6, advertising dealing with the sale of gambling equipment or printed matter dealing with gambling shall not be accepted. Number 7, nudity or meticulous purpose and salacious postures shall not be permitted in the advertising of any product. Clothed figures shall never be presented in such a way to be offensive or contrary to good taste or morals. Number 8, to the best of his ability, each publisher shall ascertain that all statements made in advertisements conform to the fact and avoid misrepresentation. Number 9, advertisement in medical or toiletry products of questionable nature shall be rejected. Advertisements for medical, health, or toiletry products endorsed by the American Medical Association or the American Dental Association shall be deemed acceptable. And that was it. So they basically had that you had to follow all those advertising rules. And if you didn't follow those advertising rules, your comic could be banned. So they had to sort of even not just censor the comic itself, but who was allowed to advertise in those comics. So a lot of these comics did rely on heavily on the advertising of other products. And a lot of those products were not allowed to be advertised anymore. So not only did the Comic Code Authority go after their distribution so that they couldn't really distribute the comics anymore, but they went after the other source of revenue for these comics by going after the types of things that were allowed to advertise in them. So it was a double whammy for a lot of these publishers. So that is the Comic Code Authority. I tried to read it the best I could. I'm not the greatest at reading out loud. It's not my thing. But I tried. So I hope you enjoyed that. I know it's a little bit dry to just hear me reading all the codes and standards, but it's actually very useful. And I hope that it gives some insight into what really impacted the way comics were created after the Comic Code Authority and how it kind of made a lot of the comics much more bland. I mean, if you can't if you have to be really tame about the type of blood or gore that you show, or the bad guys can't have any other motive but being bad, and the good guys always have to be good, it's not so interesting. It really lacks a lot of the nuance. And that is why, like during the Bronze Age, and there's really that change where, the Silver Age is all about conforming to the comic code authority. Well, the Bronze Age is where they start to rebel. And they then you get the sort of the rise of the underground comics, and you get the rise of comics like, Stan Lee's Spider-Man 97, which basically said, hey, we want to talk about drugs in this issue, and previously you weren't allowed to talk about drugs. So, we want to talk about controversial issues, and they really wanted to address more than what the comic code authority would allow. So there was that, rebellion against these very strict rules. And that really kind of made comics boring in a lot of ways, but did lead to the rise of superheroes. Because if you think about the story of a superhero is a character that is good, fundamentally good, and they're fighting evil. And that really is, pretty easy to get past on these rules. It's they try to keep, and they have to make sure that the costumes of the superheroes are pretty tame, but for the most part, you can do so and get past these rules. So yeah, I'm curious, what do people think about these rules? What do you think about this video? Please leave your comments below, and remember to like and subscribe as well. Thanks again. Bye.